They said I'd never speak again. Now I'm a speaker. They told me I'd never speak again. Not a word, not a whisper. My voice was gone. My dream was over. But today, I speak on stages across the world, not because I was lucky, but because I refused to stay silent. My name is Samir, and the first word I ever said was also the last word I spoke for a very long time. I was 6 years old when the accident happened. It was a bright Sunday morning. My father was washing the car, and I was riding my bicycle down the street. I remember hearing my mother call out, "Breakfast is ready." I turned my head for 1 second. That 1 second changed everything. A truck came out of nowhere. There was no time to think, no time to scream, just the sound of metal, crashing bones, and silence. When I woke up, everything was blurry. My head was wrapped, my throat felt like it was burning, and my mother was crying by my side. The doctors said I had survived, but barely. My skull had been fractured, my vocal cords were severely damaged, my ability to speak was gone, completely. I didn't understand. I tried to ask what happened, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out, not even a whisper. That day, a part of me died, a part that most people take for granted, the ability to speak. The doctors gave their final words. "We're sorry. He may never speak again." I was 6 years old, and I was told I'd never be able to say another word in my life. At first, I didn't believe them. I thought it was temporary. I kept trying to talk. Every day, I would cry when no one was watching. I wanted to say mom again. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But nothing came. Weeks passed, then months, and soon silence became my life. I had to start using sign language. My classmates were kind at first, but then the teasing started. One boy called me Silent Samir. Another one said, "Why don't you go live in a library? It's quiet like you." I didn't have the words to fight back, so I stayed quiet. I started avoiding people. I sat in corners. I stopped playing. I felt invisible. But something changed when I turned 12. Our school had a guest speaker that day, a man in a wheelchair who had lost his legs in war. He talked about pain, loss, and how he never gave up. But what moved me the most was his voice. It was full of power, full of emotion. He owned every word. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. Not just speak, but speak in a way that moves people. It sounded like a dream, an impossible dream, a cruel joke even. I couldn't even say my own name. But the fire was lit inside me. That night, I asked my mother to take me to a speech therapist again. She hesitated. "They said there's nothing we can do, sweetheart." But I begged, and she agreed. I went to therapy every week, every day, every hour I could. At first, it was hopeless. I couldn't even make a sound. The therapist tried different techniques, but nothing worked. But one evening, after nearly a year, I let out a sound. It was small, scratchy, just a rough ah. But it was something. My mother cried. My therapist hugged me. I smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next 5 years became a war, not against others, but against my own limits. I trained my voice like a muscle. I learned how to pronounce every letter again. My voice was never perfect. It cracked. It was rough, but it was real. At 17, I stood in front of my class and read 2 paragraphs aloud. They clapped. I cried. At 19, I recorded a video, a message of hope for others who had lost their voices. That video went viral in my town. People started calling me the boy who spoke again. But I wanted more. I wanted to become what I once admired, a speaker. So I applied to speak at a youth conference. I got rejected. They said my voice was too damaged, but I kept applying. One day, I got accepted to a local event. There were only 30 people, but to me, it felt like 30,000. My heart was racing. My palms were shaking. But when I stood in front of the mic, I took a deep breath and I spoke. My voice wasn't smooth. It was raspy, broken, but people listened. They leaned in. Some had tears in their eyes. I talked about silence, about pain, about how losing your voice doesn't mean losing your power. When I finished, no one clapped. They stood, a standing ovation. For the first time in my life, I felt like my pain had become my purpose. Today, I'm 27, and I speak at schools, conferences, and events across the country. I use the same voice they said would never work again. Every time I step on stage, I remember the silence. I remember the little boy who couldn't say mom, the boy who was laughed at, ignored, forgotten. And now, that same voice is inspiring people to keep going. So if you're watching this, if someone told you that you can't, if they said you're not good enough, you'll never make it, or you don't belong, remember this. They said I'd never speak again. But now I speak for those who can't. Now I speak to remind people that the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing about you. Not because it's easy, but because you chose not to give up.